Hey everybody, welcome into the Alabama Recruiting Show. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside our Crimson Tide recruiting expert, Chris Kirshner. Chris, thanks for being here. Thanks everybody for watching. We've got a really good show lined up today, including talking about defensive back Nadab Joseph, why he didn't commit to Alabama today. Chris has got the lowdown about that. But first, we want to say farewell to the Georgia Dome, which was like a home away from home for Alabama. You know, people called it Bryant-Denny of the East. Today at 7:32 a.m., the demolition began. So many memories were made by Alabama right there in that stadium, Chris.
Yep, and there it goes. I think it's hilarious though that the bus actually blocked the
our perfect shot,
the live shot of our live stream. That's pretty funny how Martyr just got in the way there. But yeah, a lot of fun memories for Alabama in the Georgia Dome. Big playoff win over Washington to get to the national championship game, 6 SEC championships. Just a lot of fun memories for Alabama fans inside that place.
And the official Alabama football account today tweeted their own farewell, and they were 10-1. That was the record under Saban.
Yeah, that's
in
crazy.
The Dome. Overall, 11-3, and you mentioned the 6 SEC championships. So very nice of them to send off the Dome with a farewell. But can you believe Saban? 10-1. He went to the SEC championship 11 times, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that just how often Alabama has played inside the Georgia Dome. I mean, not many teams can say that they've played as many games inside there, and it's just a testament of how good Alabama has been over the years under Coach Saban. And I'm sure, the Mercedes-Benz Dome is going to be, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I should say, is going to be the new home, the new Bryant-Denny East for the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and it all comes down to the Iron Bowl, with which team in the West plays. Could be Alabama again. We hope it's Alabama again because this is a recruiting show. So all of those SEC championship wins and all the trips to the Dome, now the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I mean, that has to be amazing for recruiting, right? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, anytime Alabama wins, it's definitely a good thing for Alabama just because recruits want to play for winners. And over the years, especially under Coach Saban, Alabama has done that. They've just shown that they can win. They can beat anybody, anywhere. Doesn't matter what stadium they're playing in. Anytime, Alabama gets big wins over big-time opponents, it definitely helps recruiting.
And before we get to the rest of the show, what is your prediction for the Iron Bowl? I mean, obviously we want Alabama to win, but do you think that Alabama will be back in the SEC championship again this year playing Georgia?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it's going to be a really tight game. Auburn is a really talented team, very, very good defensively. Jarrett Stidham has shown that he can make some explosive plays under center. Kerryon Johnson, one of the top running backs in the country. It's going to be a really, really fun game. I'm excited to be there this upcoming weekend. Honestly, I think it could go either way. I mean, Auburn is playing at a really high level. Alabama has had some injuries. We'll see if Alabama can get some of those linebackers back this Saturday. Mac Wilson, Christian Miller, Terrell Lewis. If those guys can play on Saturday, I think Alabama will get the W.
All right, fans, we want your thoughts too. If you think Alabama will make it to the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, what you think about the current topics we're going to be talking about today, and if anyone has any good Dome memories, we would love to share those too later in the show. So we'll get to your thoughts in just a minute, but let's talk about defensive back Nadab Joseph. So he was supposed to commit to Alabama. You actually had some inside information on that a little bit earlier before he really announced he was not going to commit. It was supposed to happen about 3:30. Why did he choose to delay his commitment today?
Yeah, I mean, it's recruiting. Sometimes kids just decide that they don't want to commit anymore, and that's what really happened with Nadab Joseph. Like you said, he was going to make his decision today at 3:30 Eastern. He let me know around 3 o'clock that his decision was not going to happen anymore. So, is it a concern for Alabama? I know a lot of fans were asking me about that when he delayed his decision, especially coming off a trip to Georgia this past weekend. Joseph is down to 3 schools: Alabama, Georgia, LSU. He took a visit to Georgia this past weekend, and he decided to delay his decision after that trip. Do I think that really played a factor into his decision to not go ahead and commit? No, I don't think so. I still think Alabama is in a really good spot for him. If he went ahead and went through with his decision today, I still think Alabama would have been the choice for Joseph. I still think Alabama is going to be the pick for him whenever he decides to announce. Joseph told me actually that he's planning on taking a visit to LSU this upcoming weekend for LSU's game against Texas A&M. Joseph was committed to LSU at one point, but I really don't think the Tigers are that big of a factor here, even though they are one of his top 3 schools. Like I said, I still think Alabama is in very, very good shape with him whenever he decides to announce.
Okay, so you mentioned he's going to be in Baton Rouge this week in LSU. Maybe he just wanted to, keep getting looks, keep getting the attention of being a big-time recruit. For I know, sure. I mean, these are young guys. We have to remember these are like 17, 18, 19-year-old kids that are still looking for some of the spotlight. So if and when he does commit to the Tide, how big of a recruit is he, and how big of an impact is he going to make right away at Alabama?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be a big win for Alabama. Alabama really needs several cornerbacks in this class. He fits the mold for what kind of player Alabama wants at cornerback. He's 6'2", 180. A lot of Nick Saban's cornerbacks over the years are over 6 feet. Joseph is over 6 feet. He's definitely a guy who could play right away, and it's important for Alabama to land these cornerbacks just because the secondary is going to be depleted next year. Alabama will lose both of its starting cornerbacks, Anthony Averett and Levi Wallace. Both of those guys will have exhausted their eligibility. Nickel cornerback Tony Brown, he's also going to be gone. Safety Emory Jones, and not to mention Alabama will likely have to replace Minka Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison because those guys are likely going to go to the NFL draft. So, the secondary is going to be depleted, and Joseph is a guy who could step in right away and make an impact.
So besides Joseph, let's just say he doesn't end up committing to Alabama. We all hope that he does. Who are some of the other cornerbacks that the Tide is looking at right now?
Yeah, there are several names to keep an eye on over these next few weeks. 4-star cornerback Savion Smith, junior college prospect. He was once a cornerback for LSU. Transferred from LSU to Mississippi Gulf Coast actually over the summer. Alabama looks like it's going to be the strong leader. He's expected to visit Auburn this weekend, so it'll be another opportunity for Savion to see Alabama in person. He was last on campus in Tuscaloosa for the LSU game. He's a guy to know. 5-star cornerback Tyson Campbell out of South Florida. Alabama's #1 overall target at the position. He's been listed as such for pretty much since the start of the year. It's likely down to 3 teams at this point for Campbell. He won't say that publicly, but Alabama, Georgia, Miami, those are the main 3 schools fighting for Campbell. Right now, from talking to people in Tuscaloosa, I know some of those guys feel like Campbell is actually leaning toward Georgia at this point. Campbell has not visited Tuscaloosa this fall. He's expected to take an official visit to Alabama after the season, and at that point, perhaps Alabama can regain some of that momentum with Campbell like they had this past summer. Another guy to know, Josh Jobe. He's committed to Miami right now, playing his high school football in Connecticut. He actually had to move from Miami to Connecticut to finish out his high school football career because in the state of Florida, you cannot be 19 years old and play high school football. Jobe is 19, so he had to go to a boarding school in Connecticut. I know from talking to people close to the program, they feel like Josh Jobe will eventually end up flipping from Miami to Alabama, and that's despite the Hurricanes' success on the field. A lot of times, like we said, recruits like winners, and he's from Miami. Miami's really good, one of the top 4 teams in the program in the country. So, who knows? But those are definitely some cornerbacks to keep an eye on. Yeah,
absolutely. And we have so much great information. After we're done being live here on Facebook, head on over to seccountry.com too, and all of this information is there as well. We've got a ton of people watching right now. We've got a little over 100 people in the room. People watching from South Carolina, North Carolina. So thanks everybody for tuning in. But let's stick with the defensive side of the ball for a second. 4-star linebacker J.J. Peterson had a playoff game. It was Colquitt County High School against Walton this past Friday night. You were actually there. So linebacker right now that position is so thin. Well, the depth is there. So many injuries. So it's going to be a huge storyline in the Iron Bowl. How much are those injuries going to affect the game? But J.J. Peterson could be somebody that Alabama could, be replacing some of these guys with next year. What did you see out of him, and is he hot for Alabama right now?
Yeah, I think he's as close of a lock as you can get for Alabama. Spoke to him and his coach, Rush Probst, after the game. Both those guys said Alabama is the strong leader at this point. But what was more impressive to me about Peterson is that he told me that he had sustained a leg injury in the second half. He actually described the pain on a 1 to 10 scale as a 9. He was actually crying after the game, just how painful of an injury he sustained, and he was still flying sideline to sideline in that game, as you can see in these highlights. Yeah, I mean, Peterson is definitely a major target for Alabama in the 2018 class. Arguably Alabama's top linebacker target. He's listed Alabama as his leader now for about over a year. It would be a giant shock if he doesn't choose the Crimson Tide. Rush Probst, very close with Alabama defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt. Pruitt actually served on Probst's staff when he was at Hoover High School. Those two are very, very close. Pruitt remains in contact with him. And most importantly, what Coach Probst told me after the game is that schools have already started to back off recruiting J.J. Peterson. Schools like Auburn, Michigan, and Georgia, because those schools feel like he's likely going to go to Alabama, and there's really no point in continuing to recruit him.
Yeah. And how, recruiting across state lines is huge, obviously, but how does Alabama kind of measle their way in there and get such a top recruit in the state of Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama has shown that no matter where prospects are, we saw it this past class in the 2017 recruiting cycle. Alabama went and got one of the nation's top quarterbacks out of the state of Hawaii in Tua Tagovailoa. Like we were talking about, if you win games, recruits are going to want to play for you. It doesn't matter if they live in Alaska, Zambia, Zimbabwe. If they're good and Alabama wants them, Alabama has just shown that. Alabama has just shown that they can get players no matter where they live. So I think that's a big reason why Alabama can go in the state of Georgia, even with the Bulldogs being one of the top teams in the country and pulling these guys out.
I like to see Saban take his private jet to Zimbabwe and get a couple of players.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Well, what about a Florida QB commit, Matt Corral? He was in Tuscaloosa this past Saturday for the Cupcake game against Mercer. Him along with 3 others were on the sidelines for the game. Tell me about what you think about him, the QB race, maybe him versus Emory Jones, and who are the other guys on the sidelines for the Mercer game?
Yeah, Alabama definitely has its eyes on Matt Corral. Florida committed to the Gators this past summer. He actually chose Florida over Alabama and Georgia at the time. But from what I was told, Corral does not really seem like a viable option for Alabama, even after his official visit this past weekend. The staff feels like he's 100% locked in with the Gators, and that's not really that big of a deal for Alabama at this time. Even entering this official visit this past weekend, Corral did not have a committable offer from Alabama, just because Alabama has its focus on four-star Ohio State quarterback commit Emory Jones. He remains the team's top option for Alabama. So I don't really expect much more movement when it comes to Matt Corral in Alabama's class, just because the Crimson Tide continue to remain confident with Emory Jones flipping from Ohio State to Alabama. Alabama also hosted 2 other official visitors this past weekend, and both those guys do not have committable offers. Another Florida commit, cornerback Devad Wilson, he actually picked up a verbal offer from Alabama this past weekend, but that's just a verbal offer in case Alabama misses on a guy like Nadab Joseph, who we talked about, Tyson Campbell, Josh Jobe. If those guys go elsewhere, maybe at that point Alabama circles back with Devad Wilson and says, hey, now you can commit. Outside of Wilson, Daniel Fa'alele, 6'8", 400-pound offensive tackle from IMG Academy. He also remains a backup option just in case Alabama misses on 4-star tackles Panay Sewell and Nicholas Petit-Frere.
Any new movement at all with Emory Jones? Are there any little inklings? I know that if you have been watching us from the beginning a couple weeks ago, he did take another visit to Ohio State. So anything else coming down the pipes about Emory Jones at all?
He's expected to actually visit Auburn this weekend. It'll be another opportunity for him to see Alabama in person. He visited for the season opener in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, he's seen Tuscaloosa several times this year. He's also seen them at neutral site games. Now it's going to be an away game for Emory Jones. So anytime he can see Alabama up close in person, and he's expected to be in Auburn this weekend, I think it's definitely a positive for Alabama's chances at flipping him. He did help carry Heard County High School to another playoff win, so he has a game this upcoming Friday, so I don't expect any movement as far as him deciding to change his recruitment or change his commitment or sticking with Ohio State at this point, just because he remains focused on high school football.
So Emory Jones isn't the only potential commit and recruit that Auburn will be hosting this weekend for Alabama. Who else will be there for the big Iron Bowl that could maybe flip some guys or change some people's minds in a big game like that?
Yeah, even though Alabama, is going to be in Auburn and a lot of its main targets are going to be on the sidelines, Alabama coaches cannot talk to these players just because, they are not the home team. So all these guys who are visiting for the Iron Bowl are Auburn's targets, I should say. So Auburn can talk to these recruits. Alabama cannot talk to these recruits. But it's important to know that a lot of Alabama's targets in the 2018 and 2019 class will be on the sidelines this weekend. Four-star tight end Luke Ford, one of Alabama's top tight end targets in this class. He'll be on the sidelines as an Auburn official visitor. I expect one of Luke Ford or Dominic Wood Anderson to be Alabama's tight end in this 2018 class. So it's really nice to have Ford see Alabama once again in person. He was there in Tuscaloosa for the Arkansas game. Another guy to know, three-star defensive end Andreas Fox out of Mobile, one of Alabama's top defensive end targets in this class. Fox is down a couple schools: Alabama, Auburn, Stanford, LSU. From talking to people close to the program, it seems like Alabama is in really good shape to land Andreas Fox when he commits. He doesn't have a set timeline for when he's expected to announce his decision, but I expect Alabama to be the school he picks. He grew up a big-time fan of Alabama. His parents, he actually told me a few months ago that his parents want him to choose Alabama. And a lot of times in recruiting, parents have a big say when it comes to where their son is going to play college football. So Savion Smith, another guy who we mentioned earlier, he's expected to be in Auburn this weekend. There will be a lot of guys in Auburn this weekend that Alabama has its eyes on. That full visitors list will likely be posted on SECCountry.com this Friday by our Auburn recruiting reporter, Benjamin Wolk.
So of the guys that are going to be in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and I'm just going to recap, you mentioned all of them, but Luke Ford, Savion Smith, Quay Walker, Andreas Fox, who are Alabama and Auburn both after the most?
Yeah, there are several guys that Alabama and Auburn are fighting over. You mentioned one of them, Quay Walker. He's currently committed to Alabama. He's visited Auburn a couple times now, likely going to visit Auburn 2 more times before actually signing. It's a little bit of a concern for Alabama that Quay is not planning on signing his letter of intent during the early signing period, and I feel like that just shows you that he's not really 100% committed to Alabama at this time. If he needs more time to figure out where he actually wants to play college football, I think it's between Alabama and Auburn at this point. He's very good friends with Marcavius Bryant, a freshman defensive end linebacker for the Auburn Tigers. But from talking to people close to the program at Alabama, Quay is still saying the right things when it comes to his commitment. They still feel like he's locked in with Alabama, so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
All right, and fans, we're going to get to your comments and questions in just a moment, so get those rolling in. But taking a look ahead to the 2019 class briefly, has there been any shift there, or who are some of the top guys for 2019 still?
Yeah, Alabama has 3 commitments currently in the 2019 class. 4-star running back Trey Sanders, 4-star offensive tackle Pierce Quick, and 4-star offensive guard Diavi Hammond. Only 3 commitments right now. Alabama is expected to land a commitment on December 15th from 4-star linebacker King Makuta. Taulia Tagovailoa to his little brother. He remains out there as a quarterback option for Alabama in the 2019 class. 4-star safety Jalen McCullough, 5-star center Clay Webb out of the state of Alabama. Just those are some of the guys Alabama fans should keep an eye on in these next few weeks and leading into the next year.
All right, we got a really good question in the comment section on our Facebook Live from David Grantham, and he asked, who is the top recruit that Alabama is most likely to flip? And I feel like we've covered so much today, but just circling back in, and if you're just now tuning in, as soon as we get done live here, you can go rewatch the entire video because we've covered so much today. But what are your thoughts on who is the top most likely recruit for Alabama to flip? Asks David Grantham in the Facebook comment section.
I think the likeliest candidate to flip from a school to Alabama is 4-star wide receiver Jacob Copeland, currently committed to Florida. Just with the uncertainty that Alabama has had, with the uncertainty Florida has had over these past few months, firing Jim McElwain, likely not going to retain wide receivers coach Kerry Dixon. It's likely that Jacob Copeland decides to flip from Florida to Alabama. It's just a matter of when. From talking to people in the know, Copeland seems like a very, very likely candidate to give his commitment to the Crimson Tide.
Rod Daly asks, defensive linemen that are currently committed to Ohio State, what is the status on those guys?
Yeah, I think he's talking about 5-star defensive end Brenton Cox. Brenton Cox is a major target for Alabama in the 2018 class. He was actually planning on taking an official visit to Alabama this past weekend for the Mercer game. Those plans fell through. Cox instead visited Georgia this past weekend, but it still remains a long shot that he ends up flipping from Ohio State to any other school, just because he loves Ohio State. He really hasn't given any inkling of actually wanting to change his commitment, but Alabama remains in contact with Cox, and that's really all you can ask for at this point.
Doug Edge Sr. asks, is Alabama getting any flip players from Tennessee that you know of?
No, not at this point. I mean, they still have their eyes on a few guys. 4-star athlete Alontae Taylor, 4-star cornerback J.C. Horn. Those are really the 2 guys that Alabama has its eyes on. Alontae Taylor actually decommitted from Tennessee already, but a lot of Tennessee's commitments remain backup options at this point.
All right, and our last comment, and a lot of people want your opinion again on the Iron Bowl, but Red Davenport says Saban has a losing record against Auburn when they have a 9-win season. I did read that earlier this week. So again, I know you gave your prediction at the top of the show, but what are your thoughts on this weekend's Iron Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could go either way with Auburn being that good of a program right now. They're playing at a really high level. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm interested to see if those linebackers, like we talked about at the start of the show, Christian Miller, Terrell Lewis, Mack Wilson, will they be healthy enough to play? If those guys are healthy enough to play, I think Alabama definitely gets the win. But with its depleted linebacking corps, I think it's going to be a really tight game. I have Alabama by 3 points over Auburn.
Okay, and out of the 2018 recruiting list, commit list, any more shifts, any final thoughts on this week in Alabama recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on if Nadab Joseph wants to go ahead and actually commit.
Come on.
Yeah, so I know Alabama is waiting on him to go ahead and make his decision, but like we said, Alabama will get to see some of those guys on the sidelines in Auburn this weekend. Can't talk to them, obviously, but as far as a commitment this week, I don't think we're going to see any of that unless Joseph goes ahead and makes his decision. All
right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We're here every Monday at 5 o'clock on the Alabama SEC Country page live. And as soon as we're done here, you can go back and rewatch it as well. We're also on seccountry.com. Where else can people find their recruiting information from you?
Yep, seccountry.com. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Kirshner.
All right, and I'm on Twitter at Hannah Chalker. So thanks, everybody, for watching this week's Alabama Recruiting Show. We'll see you right back here next Monday. And don't forget to head over to seccountry.com. See you guys.